Well, I think we all know that I love Grace. But she's the reason for all of this right now. She got me sick. She got sick last week toward the middle of the week, and I knew she was sick. She had a runny nose and all of this stuff. But when she comes up to you with kissy faces, you can't do much else but to give her a kiss back. And that's why I ended up with this. So the reason I didn't go around and try to shake everybody's hand this morning was I don't want to get you sick. After the end of the sermon, I'm actually just going to make a beeline to my office because I don't want to be around you. I don't want you to go through this. I don't want my worst enemy to go through this. So if I shook your hand this morning, we want to rethink our relationship. So it might be a shorter sermon today, but I think that's fine. But we're continuing our sermon series on the Psalms of Ascent. And we said that the Psalms of Ascent is the Psalms that many think were sung as they made their pilgrimage to Jerusalem in the three main feasts that they would make the trip to Jerusalem. So we looked at Psalms 120. And we looked at the sojourner's struggle, that he's facing lying lips against him. We see how it is to live as an exile in a land. We looked at Psalms 121, and we looked at the fear of a sojourner as he lifts his eyes up to the hills. Where does his help come from? His help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Last week, we looked at the sojourners' joy. They finally arrived in Jerusalem, and somebody has said to them, "Let us go to the house of the Lord," and he's glad. He's thankful. He wants to go and be in the presence of God. This week, we're going to look at Psalms 124. It's another psalm of ascent, but it's also another psalm that is written by David. Now, one of the things you may notice as we go through the Psalms of Ascent, some of them's written by David, some of them's written well after David's reign. Some of them are written whenever they were in Babylonian captivity, or when they're coming out of Babylonian captivity. So the Psalms of Ascent is, in essence, a songbook within a songbook. Somebody has compiled all of these songs together as they make that trip to Jerusalem. In 124 it says, "If it had not been the Lord who was on our side," let Israel now say, "if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, when people rose up against us, then they would have swallowed us up alive when they were angry and kindled against us. Then the flood would have swept us away. The torrent would have gone over us. Then over us would have gone the raging waters. Blessed be the Lord, who has not given us as prey to their teeth. We have escaped like a bird from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth." So the first question is, when is this psalm written? Well, since it's a psalm of David, many people believe that it was written somewhere around 2 Samuel chapter 5. In 2 Samuel chapter 5, what we see is Saul, who was the first king of Israel, he's dead. Jonathan, his son, is dead. David is now made the king over Israel. And what happens as soon as he is made king? The Philistines, they come up against him. It was a fierce enemy. We see that even with listening to what David said. If it had not been the Lord on our side, when people rose up against us, they would have swallowed us alive, which means it was going to be quick. It's going to swallow us alive. The Philistines, they were a fierce enemy to Israel. Yes, David had defeated Goliath, But now the Philistines are once again coming against him. And his first response is to go to the Lord. He says, Lord, or should I go up against them? And God ultimately tells him to go up against them. He is going to be, paraphrased here, but basically a flood that's going to destroy them. I love the word usage here. David is speaking, if God had not intervened, if he wasn't on our side, they would have taken us as a flood. But when David prayed to God, God says, I will overthrow them. So David goes up against them. He defeats them. But once again, the Philistines rise up against him. The second battle. So he says, Lord, should I go against them? And he says, don't go up against them, but go behind them. Attack. This psalm is probably one of the first psalms of Ascent that we see such imagery here. Of the flood, of the bird. We see so many imageries put within this poetry. But we need to know if it wasn't for the Lord then. And I love that because we see this throughout the psalm. We see kind of connections here. We see if, then, but, therefore. If the Lord wasn't on our side, then we would be destroyed. But he is. Therefore we will praise. The whole second half of this psalm, starting with verse 6 through 8, is a praise to God. If he wasn't on our side, which he is, but if he wasn't, then we would perish, but he is. Therefore, what's our response? Would it bring him praise? But if we want to look at an application for the Christian today, I don't think there's any better application than we see in verse 7. Because verse 7 here, we have escaped like a bird. The snare is broken. We have escaped. It's the most visual out of all of the other illustrations that he makes. The enemy tried to set up a trap. Just as if you was going to try to catch a bird, you would set up a trap to try to catch that bird. And the more that the bird fought against that trap, the more that it would become entangled within that trap, just as Satan has tried to set his trap. He, like the beast that we see in this psalm, is going around, as we see in 1 Peter chapter 5. He's prowling around looking for someone to devour. And if it hadn't been the Lord that is on our side, we would be devoured. Do you remember what Jesus says to Peter? He goes to Peter and he says, Satan wants to sift you. But I have intervened. If it had not been for the Lord, then we would be destroyed. But he's for us. Therefore, we should praise. If it hadn't been for him, we would still be caught in that snare of the devil, in the snare of sin. And the more that we try to fight against it, the more that we try to earn salvation on our own terms, the more that we're going to become entangled within that trap. But as we said last week, every psalm should be read in light of Jesus' coming, his death, and his resurrection. So if we read this in light of that, we can boldly say, the snare is broken. And we have escaped. And how? Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. This is kind of a phrase that goes throughout the Psalms. We've looked at this before, Psalm 121, but I want us to look at it a little bit more. Let's look at 3 different points of it. Our help is in the name of the Lord. I think oftentimes we need to remind ourselves who the Lord is. Because oftentimes when we escape from that snare, what is our first response? Is it praise? Or do we take it for granted? Well, that's what God's supposed to do, isn't it? I mean, God's supposed to take me out of those traps. That's what He's supposed to do. So we take it for granted. But if we know who the Lord is, not only have we looked before His name is Yahweh, He's a personal God, but we also need to be reminded that He is all-powerful. As we see later on, He made heaven and earth. He has all power. He is all-knowing. He knows exactly what we're going through. He knows what we're going to go through before we even go through it. And He's all-caring. Cares for each and every one of us. It's one reason that I love this psalm so much. If you will notice, throughout it, 3 times the word "our" is used. 7 times "us," 3 times "we." It's bringing us in together as a community. It's easy for me to say, take it more independently. I know what God has done for me, but let's look at what God has done for each and every one of us as a community. But also, we do need to take it personally. Because our help, my personal help, my personal God who loves me not to be there as a servant, the one who loves me enough that is there to help me through whatever I face. Just as I would be there for Grace. Just as you would be there for your son or your daughter. Why are you a servant to them? No, it's because you love them. You want to be a help. But notice also, our help is in the name of the Lord. He is our only help in the midst of crisis, in the midst of difficulties. He's the only one that we can truly turn to. That's why I love Psalm 20, verse 7. It says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. What is your trust in? Is your trust in chariots? Or you trust in horses? Or you trust in something else, your bank account, or whatever it may be? Is that where your trust is? Or if your trust is in the name of the Lord? And you can boldly say, we have escaped. The snare is broken. There's freedom. Before I came here, I did jail ministry for about 3 years. And I walked into the jail one day. We had been working with this guy, been talking with this guy, and we baptized this guy. And I walk in, and the first thing that I do is I walk into the dormitory where we're going to have our lessons. Sometimes it's in there, sometimes right outside. It's at the ball court, which is about 30, 40 feet high. You've got basically a chain link fence over top. I mean, I went through one door, and a locked door, to another little small area to make sure that one locked before they opened this one, and then they locked that one. I went through about 4 or 5 locked doors before I ever got to this guy. And I was thinking about the ball court of, we sing that song, I'll Fly Away. Like a bird from prison walls, I'll fly away. And we've sung that on the ball courts. And I look up and see that chain link fence. I'm still reminded that they are captive. So I go into the dormitory and I asked the guy, I said, how are you doing today? And he looked at me and he said, I have never felt so free. And in my mind, as I said, I remembered the ball courts, the chain link fence on the top, concrete walls on each side. I remember walking through all of those 5 locked doors and hearing that door slam behind me. And I asked this guy, how are you today? And he says, I have never felt free. He was by far, in humanly standards, anything but free. He was an inmate. But he was an inmate who met Christ. And because he had met Christ, that snare was broken. He had escaped. He was the bird that went from the prison bars. He was free, even as inmate. Have you ever felt that freedom? That no matter what you're facing in life, the difficulty, everything that may be weighing down on you right now, you can still say, I have never felt so free. Because that's what Jesus offers. Jesus offers us freedom. Freedom from sin. Freedom from our own self. So that we can boldly say, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Nobody can condemn, not even myself, which I love to do. Nobody can. If you felt that freedom, if not, and you want to, you can